Bloodborne, a beloved game by the renowned game studio From Software, commissioned by Sony to be an exclusive PlayStation title. A game that, while staying true to the FromSoft formula, has its own charm and theme that has made the game a fan favorite amongst the Souls-like genre. A game that, for some reason, Sony refuses to remaster. It appears that they'd rather remaster one of their other IPs, despite the countless pleas and guaranteed money. Keep in mind, this game dropped in 2017. Who even asked for this to get remastered? But that's a topic for another day. I'm here to find out if Bloodborne lives up to the hype in 2024 as a first-time player. Now, I do need to give some context for what brings me here today. So I've had previous experience with Souls games, but prior to completing Elden Ring, I had really only played a couple hours of DS1, DS2, and maybe about 5 hours of Sekiro. I couldn't quite understand at the time why people would subject themselves to the torture that is repeatedly dying to the same boss or set of mobs tens or even hundreds of times, and sometimes even dealing with grueling runbacks. Until Elden Ring. I think a large chunk of it was due to getting older and maturing, but after finally beating Elden Ring and conquering the DLC, pre-nerf for Dawn by the way, I was left craving more, and what better way to satiate that craving than Bloodborne? A game many people have as their interchangeable 1 and 2s in order of the best Souls-like with Elden Ring. Now there was one issue. The only PlayStation I have is a beat up PlayStation 3 that's been collecting dust for what feels like an eternity, and you need at least a PS4 or 5 to play Bloodborne. After countless hours of strenuous research, I was able to discover that you can play Bloodborne with PS Plus on PC. All I had to do was cough up a measly $18 so that I can stream it over the cloud. In my research, I also discovered that it's a dice roll if the game is even playable. Over the cloud, many people reported that even with high-end PCs, they were met with countless crashes or the game running on such low FPS you'd think it's a PowerPoint presentation. And last but not least, you can't play the DLC over PS Now. As heartbreaking as it sounds, I wasn't going to rob myself of the chance to play it without having to buy an entire separate console. Now just a heads up, there are going to be some light spoilers ahead. Now, with that being said, that was the game. I streamed the entire playthrough on my Twitch over the course of a couple weeks. The game starts as any FromSoft game begins, with you completely lost as to what the hell is going on. But immediately I was fully enamored by the world that was seemingly ripped out of a Lovecraftian novel, set in what I can only guess is modeled after England. As someone who's 50% English and never having been, I now feel like I've had the full experience. The charming locals, the great food, and of course the lovely architecture and weather. Jokes aside though, Bloodborne plays very similarly to most Souls games, with a few key differences. The built-in parry system and faster combat that rewards you by healing you if you're aggressive shortly after taking damage. A mechanic you must master, as you have a finite amount of healing that you have to farm whenever you run out. Which brings me to some of the cons I had with the game. The finite health vials and silver bullets made it so that I had to often spend a lot of time farming off mobs to replenish and stockpile. Late game, this wasn't too bad of an issue, as I found a route that yielded me a lot of both pretty quickly. While still tedious, it was manageable. The problem was early game, and maybe it's because I'm just bad, but while I learned the timings of the pairing and the flow of the game, I had to take a lot of time out of my playthrough just to try and recover my resources. The parry system was awesome, and learning the timing of certain mobs felt very rewarding. My only gripe with the system is how it felt like it took more and more of a backseat as I progressed throughout the game. I felt as though I couldn't use that mechanic for most bosses in the game, so I was seemingly just holding this pea shooter that had no real function. I can totally understand why you wouldn't be able to parry a giant amalgamation of fleshy mass, but aside from some of the more annoying mobs, in the later half of the game I hardly had any real need or use for the gun. Being forced to stream the game over the cloud had its fair share of issues. It was largely fine, but there was a bit of input delay, and paired with the low frame rate, it was hard to get a real gauge of the timings and the dodges for the parries. This also made it really hard to process what was going on in certain boss fights and would make it difficult to tell what attack was coming my way. I don't fault the game for this, as it was released nearly a decade ago and I'm streaming the game over the internet, so these things are to be expected. I just wanted to include this in case anyone is thinking of streaming it over PS Now, and of course I have to reiterate how sad it is I'm not able to enjoy the DLC, especially as a Moonlight Greatsword fan. Now, let's get to the good. Where do I even start? It is everything you expect from a Souls game. Phenomenal bosses, a great original soundtrack, and a story that left me in complete shock at the ending. All 3 endings. The bosses vary from the humanoid to the giant beast to the godlike entities. Each one will have you in awe as you see the large health bar appear and the amazing score begin to serenade your ears. I even found myself enjoying the gimmicky bosses, even though they made me feel like I was in an episode of Scooby-Doo chasing through a series of doors. There was something to love with everyone. Notably, Father Gascoigne was a fantastic first main boss to really force you to learn all the unique mechanics in the game. And Brietta specifically, I love the soundtrack too, and it had me humming the tune throughout my day. Insight is a unique game mechanic that I absolutely love the idea of. Insight is a stat that governs the amount of inhuman knowledge you've acquired throughout the game. It is partly used as another form of currency and allows you to summon other hunters to assist you in your journey. However, this isn't even the cool part. The higher it is, the more things you see and hear in the world. Giant beings resembling Cthulhu become visible once you reach a certain amount of insight. You can hear distant baby cries, and even in one case, you won't see monsters that a boss spawns if you have 0 insight. Having an ever-changing experience as you gain more otherworldly knowledge, even in areas you have already explored, is an amazing touch that, while not changing the core gameplay much, these are small details that add so much to the overall experience. Every weapon has 2 forms that you can freely swap between to deal with the multitudes of enemies and bosses that you're going to face. A cane sword that turns into a whip, a sword that you slot into a hammer, or even simple forms that are just extended versions of their first form. These form swaps let you play very different playstyles without having to actually swap your weapon. You can also swap seamlessly in between combos, which adds even more possibilities. One of the most beautiful things about Bloodborne is the dedicated community that's still playing the game, almost 10 years later. While I was streaming, many people would be casually browsing the Bloodborne game channel on Twitch and would pop in and give me pointers and explain some of the game mechanics I wasn't quite familiar with. And also, still seeing players running around while you play and being able to experience the co-op all these years later made me feel like I was playing the game day 1 and not 10 years later. For me, Bloodborne completely lived up to the hype. I would absolutely recommend anyone with a PlayStation to experience this immersive world that is Bloodborne. If you're on PC, I would have to advise you're taking a bit of a gamble if the game will run properly for you, and also you won't have access to the DLC. I haven't quite decided how I want to do my rating scale, but just to keep it simple for now, I would easily rank Bloodborne 9 out of 10. We can only hope and pray that one day Sony will decide to remaster Bloodborne so that we can experience it fully. I certainly look forward to playing the DLC whenever I have access to a PlayStation, or if it gets its PC port finally. As we speak, people are working countless hours to try and crack the game so they can play it on PC. This just goes to show how much people want to play it and how many people want to have it on PC, so you can have the full unlocked frame rate and access to the DLC. If you liked the video, feel free to comment, subscribe, and like. I've been playing through all the FromSoft games on my Twitch, so if you'd like to watch it live, feel free to stop by and say hello. I'll be making a whole lot more content on my YouTube in the near future, especially based on the stuff that I'm playing actively on my Twitch. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. See you next time.